I'm sure you've heard the news. Another case, unsolved. Another criminal walks free. But what if you could see behind the headlines? Welcome to Crime Chronicles HQ. Here, we don't just tell stories, we peel back the layers of the world's most disturbing mysteries. From chilling, unsolved murders, to the twisted minds of serial killers, to the cold cases that haunt detectives for decades. We break down crime scenes, examine forensic evidence, and reveal secrets others miss. Each week, we dig deeper, bringing you expert analysis, shocking discoveries, and new perspectives. Think you can handle the truth? Hit subscribe, smash that bell, and join our community of true crime detectives. Because at Crime Chronicles HQ, the case is never closed.
Our story began like so many others. We were young, we were in love, or at least the version of love we understood at 22. It was a story woven with shared dreams and the easy promises of a lifetime. We built a house, we raised 2 beautiful children. We marked the years with anniversaries, birthdays, and holidays, each one a thread added to the tapestry of our life together. From the outside, it was a masterpiece, a sturdy, reliable weaving of commitment and family. But up close, if you looked with honest eyes, you could see where the colors had faded. You could feel where the threads had grown thin, worn down by the quiet friction of unspoken truths and dreams deferred. 33 years is, honestly, a long time. It's long enough for a person to forget who they were before they became part of a we. My identity was so entangled with his, with our family, that I couldn't find where I ended and he began. I was a wife. I was a mother. I was the keeper of the calendar, the planner of vacations, the one who remembered the little things. These roles were my armor, my purpose. They filled my days and gave my life a shape I recognized. I loved my children fiercely. I respected the man I had built a life with. But love and respect are not always enough to sustain a soul. And my soul, I was beginning to realize, was starving. We had become experts in cohabitation. We moved around each other with a practiced, silent grace. We were partners in the business of running a household. But the intimacy, the spark that once made us turn to each other in the dark, had long since been extinguished. It didn't die in a blaze of anger or betrayal. It simply faded out, like an untended ember on a cold night. We were 2 strangers living in the same house, sharing a history but not a present. The silence between us grew louder than any argument ever could. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with everything we were too afraid to say. The foundation we had built was solid, but the house on top of it was empty. I would often sit in the living room after he had gone to bed, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life. The photos on the mantelpiece showed a happy couple, smiling through the decades. But I saw a young woman whose smile grew a little tighter with each passing year. I saw a stranger I barely recognized. Who was she? What did she want before she learned what she was supposed to want? The question began as a whisper, a faint curiosity. But over time it grew into a roar that I could no longer ignore. I was living in a beautiful museum dedicated to a life that was no longer mine. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I couldn't spend another day just looking at the exhibits. I had to walk out the door. The revelation didn't strike like lightning. It was more like a slow dawn, a gradual illumination of a landscape I had been living in but had never truly seen. It came in small, quiet moments. It was in the longing I felt watching a woman laugh freely with her friends at a cafe. It was in the pang of envy I experienced when my daughter spoke of her plans to travel, her future an open, unwritten book. These moments were tiny pinpricks of light, showing me the darkness I had accepted as normal. They were whispers from a part of myself I had silenced long ago, the part that dreamed of things beyond PTA meetings and grocery lists. I started taking long walks alone, just me, the pavement, and the endless sky. On these walks, I allowed myself to feel, not the feelings of a wife or a mother, but my own. I felt the ache of loneliness, a profound loneliness that had nothing to do with being physically alone. I could be in a room full of people, standing right next to my husband, and feel utterly isolated. I realized that for years I had been performing a role. I was playing the part of the contented wife so convincingly that I had almost fooled myself. But the applause had stopped, the theater was empty, and I was left standing on the stage, wondering who I was without the costume. I began to remember the girl I used to be, the one who painted canvases with bold, messy colors, the one who loved to dance to loud music in her bedroom, the one who wanted to see the world, to feel the grit of a foreign city under her feet. Where had she gone? I had packed her away, piece by piece, into a small box and tucked it into the attic of my mind. I told myself it was for the greater good, for the family, for the marriage. But now, at 55, I understood the devastating cost of that sacrifice. I had traded my own vibrant colors for a world of beige, and the quiet hum of my unlived life was becoming a deafening siren. The final crack appeared on a Tuesday. It was an ordinary day. My husband was talking about his retirement plans, about the golf courses he wanted to play. He spoke of our future, but the vision he painted was entirely his. I saw myself trailing behind him, a silent caddy in his game of life. In that moment, the truth landed with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't my future. This wasn't my dream. And if I didn't do something now, I would simply cease to exist. I would become a ghost in my own life story. The thought was more terrifying than the idea of leaving. It was the moment I knew I had to choose myself, even if it meant breaking everything. Leaving a marriage after 3 decades is not just leaving a person, it's leaving a universe. It's stepping outside a social contract you signed when you were too young to read the fine print. The world loves a long marriage. It's seen as the ultimate success story, a testament to endurance and commitment. To choose to end it is to challenge that narrative. People don't understand. But you had a good life, they'd say, their brows furrowed in confusion. He was a good man. They saw the sturdy house and the grown children and the 33 years, and they couldn't see the gaping hole in the middle of it all. They couldn't see my slow, quiet suffocation. I felt the immense weight of societal expectation on my shoulders. A woman of my age was supposed to be settling into a comfortable grandmotherly role. She was supposed to be enjoying the fruits of a life's labor, not blowing it all up to start over. I was supposed to be grateful for the stability, for the man who provided. To want more, to want passion, to want a true partner, to want to feel alive, was seen as selfish, ungrateful, foolish. I battled with these voices, both internal and external. They whispered doubts in my ear late at night. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was making the biggest mistake of my life. The judgment was subtle, but pervasive. It came in the form of concerned looks from old friends, in the awkward silences at family gatherings. It was in the questions that were never asked, the ones that hung in the air. What's wrong with her? Couldn't she just stick it out? I felt like I had to justify my own pursuit of happiness to defend my right to a life that felt authentic. It was exhausting. I was grieving the end of a massive chapter of my life, and at the same time, I was fighting a battle against a world that wanted to put me back in a box I no longer fit into. A box that was, in fact, a coffin for my spirit. But in the middle of this storm of expectation, a new strength began to grow within me. Each judgmental glance, each whispered doubt became a catalyst. It solidified my resolve. I was not doing this for anyone else. I was not doing this to make a statement. I was doing this for me, for the girl who loved to paint, and the woman who deserved to feel seen and heard. I was choosing personal fulfillment over societal approval. It was a radical act of self-preservation. I was finally learning that my own happiness was not a selfish indulgence. It was a fundamental necessity, and I was the only one who could give it to myself. Telling him was the hardest thing I have ever done. How do you tell someone you've spent more of your life with than without that it's over? How do you put words to the slow erosion of a shared soul? The words felt clumsy and cruel, no matter how gently I tried to shape them. We sat at the same kitchen table where we had planned our children's birthday parties, where we had debated finances, where we had sat in silence for thousands of meals. And I broke that silence with the most painful truth of all. I can't do this anymore, I said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irreversible. The aftermath was a slow, painful process of untangling two lives that had been woven together for 33 years. It wasn't just about dividing assets or deciding who got the good set of towels. It was about dismantling a shared history, piece by piece. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, every holiday ornament held a memory. We had to sort through the artifacts of our life together and decide what belonged to his future and what belonged to mine. It was like presiding over the archaeological dig of our own failed civilization. Each object was a reminder of a promise we couldn't keep. The pain was immense, a deep, tearing ache in my chest. Our children were grown, but the news hit them hard. Their foundation, the unshakable bedrock of their world, had cracked. They were caught in the middle, loving us both, not understanding how the story they had always known could end this way. Explaining it to them was like trying to explain the color blue to someone who has never seen it. I tried to make them understand that this wasn't about a lack of love for them, or even a lack of a certain kind of love for their father. It was about a mother who needed to save herself. It was a complicated, adult grief that I had to ask them to hold, and that was a heavy burden. There were moments of anger, of course. Accusations and blame were thrown like stones across the ever-widening canyon between us. He felt betrayed. I felt misunderstood. We were two people hurting in our own separate ways, unable to comfort each other. The grief was a solitary journey. There were nights I cried until I had no tears left, mourning not just the end of the marriage, but the death of the future I had always imagined. I was mourning the young couple who had believed in forever. Letting go of that shared history was a necessary amputation. It hurt terribly, but it was the only way to stop the spread of the disease of unhappiness. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. The first night, I slept on an air mattress on the floor because my furniture hadn't arrived yet. The room was filled with cardboard boxes, each one a neatly taped-up piece of my old life. The silence was different here. It wasn't the heavy, unspoken silence of my marriage. It was a vast, echoing emptiness. It was the sound of a life starting from scratch. That first night, I lay awake and stared at the blank ceiling, and I was terrified. The freedom I had craved so desperately now felt like a free fall, a terrifying plunge into the unknown without a safety net. For weeks, I felt utterly lost. The simple routines that had structured my life for over 30 years were gone. There was no one to make coffee for in the morning, no one's dry cleaning to pick up, no one to ask, "How was your day?" I had to learn to live with myself, for myself. I had to decide what I wanted to eat for dinner, just me. I had to learn to fill the quiet hours that stretched before me. Some days, the loneliness was a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I would wander the aisles of the grocery store, feeling like a ghost, invisible to the world. But slowly, tentatively, I began to fill the empty spaces. I started with small things. I bought a bright yellow teapot, a color my husband would have hated. I painted one wall of my living room a deep, vibrant blue. I played my music, the kind I loved, loud enough for the whole apartment to hear. These were small acts of rebellion, small declarations of independence. They were me, planting my flag in this new, uncharted territory. I started taking a pottery class on Tuesday nights, plunging my hands into the cool, wet clay. I was creating something new, something that was entirely mine, from a shapeless lump into a form of my own choosing. The terror of freedom began to transform into the thrill of possibility. The empty room was no longer a void, it was a blank canvas. The silence was no longer an absence, it was an invitation. An invitation to listen to my own thoughts, to rediscover my own voice. I started a journal, filling its pages with the words I had held inside for so long. I went to the movies by myself. I took a weekend trip to the coast, just because I could. I was learning to be my own companion, and to my surprise, I found that I was pretty good company. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it was now accompanied by a powerful, exhilarating sense of empowerment. With the dust of the divorce settling, I started to look at myself differently. For years, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a reflection defined by others, a wife, a mother, a homemaker. Now, I was beginning to see just me, a woman of 56, with lines around her eyes that told a story of both laughter and tears. A woman with silver strands in her hair that looked like threads of wisdom. I started to see a survivor, a person of strength I hadn't recognized before. The woman in the mirror was no longer a stranger. She was becoming a friend. I was finally meeting myself, and I was starting to like who I was. This reclamation was a journey inward. It was about more than just a new apartment or a new hobby. It was about healing the deep, internal wounds. It was about forgiving myself for taking so long to find my voice, and for the hurt my decision had caused. I learned that courage wasn't about the absence of fear, but about acting in spite of it. Every day I chose to get out of bed and face my new life was an act of courage. Every time I tried something new, every time I pushed past my comfort zone, I was rebuilding myself from the inside out, on a foundation of self-love and acceptance. My relationships with my children began to transform as well. Once they moved past the initial shock and hurt, they started to see me not just as their mother, but as a person. A woman with her own needs and dreams. We had honest conversations, the kind we never could have had before. I told them about my feelings of being lost, and they shared their own fears and hopes with me. A new kind of intimacy blossomed between us, one based on mutual respect and a more authentic understanding of who I was. Seeing their mother happy, truly and deeply happy, was a gift that ultimately helped them heal too. I found a photograph of myself from before I was married. I was 20, standing on a beach, my hair wild in the wind, my smile unburdened and free. I looked at that girl, and I saw the spark that I had been searching for. It hadn't been extinguished, only buried. The journey of the past few years had been about digging through the layers of duty and expectation to find her again. I wasn't that 20-year-old girl anymore, of course. I was so much more. I was her, but with the added strength and wisdom that only a life lived, with all its mistakes and triumphs, can give. I had reclaimed her spirit and merged it with the woman I had become. I didn't leave my marriage to find another man. I left to find myself. Love was the furthest thing from my mind. I was focused on building my own life, on standing firmly on my own 2 feet. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. I met him at a local art gallery. He was a retired history teacher who had a gentle smile and eyes that really saw me. When I spoke, he listened. Not just with his ears, but with his whole being. He was curious about my thoughts, my passions, my past. He wasn't trying to fit me into a pre-existing space in his life. He was simply happy to be in mine. Our love story was not the frantic, all-consuming fire of youth. It was a slow, warm burn. It was a comfortable, easy love that felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. With him, I didn't have to shrink myself. I could be loud and messy and complicated. I could talk about my dreams, and he would talk about his, and we would figure out how to weave them together without either of us losing our own thread. It was a partnership of equals, a collaboration between 2 whole people, not 2 halves trying to make a whole. After a lifetime of feeling unseen, being truly seen was the most profound and beautiful gift. He asked me to marry him a year later. We were sitting on a park bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. There was no grand gesture, no diamond ring presented on bended knee. It was a quiet question spoken with sincerity and a little bit of nervousness. "I'd like to spend the rest of my sunsets with you," he said, and in that moment I knew. The thought of marriage no longer felt like a cage, it felt like an open door. It felt like a choice, made with a clear head and a full healed heart. It wasn't about fulfilling an expectation, it was about choosing a partner for the journey ahead. So did I leave my husband of 33 years for this? For another man? The answer is no. I left my husband for myself. I left so I could breathe. I left so I could live. And in finding myself, in creating a life that was authentically mine, I made space for a love that could fit. A love that didn't require me to be smaller, but celebrated my expansion. Today is my wedding day. I am 58 years old. My future is not a fading